I didn't write a resignation letter. I didn't slam my fist on the desk, didn't scream, didn't rage at the new boss. I just placed my employee badge on the desk. And 24 hours later, 19 executives were terminated. If you think this is a story about emotions, you're wrong. This is a story about data, about timestamps, about files that weren't deleted, and about a woman who quietly built a system that the new bosses thought they could dismantle with a PowerPoint slide. My name is Diana Elwood, and for 15 years I built something they couldn't understand, a compliance system so airtight that even the FBI asked for our documentation templates. I was 42 years old, had survived 3 mergers, 2 recessions, and 1 hostile takeover. But I'd never seen anything like what happened on that Tuesday morning in March. I arrived at Arkeson Corp at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before my usual time. The building's glass facade reflected the pre-dawn darkness, and my badge beeped its familiar 3-tone welcome for what would be the last time. The security guard Marcus looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Early morning, Ms. Elwood." "Something like that, Marcus." The executive floor was empty, which was exactly what I'd planned. My heels clicked against the marble tiles in a steady rhythm, the soundtrack to 15 years of walking these halls. But today, each step felt different. Final. I reached my office and didn't turn on the lights. Instead, I sat in the darkness, watching the city wake up through floor-to-ceiling windows. My desk was already clear. I'd been moving files to secure drives for weeks, documenting everything. The new regime thought I was being cooperative. They had no idea I was building a case. At 7:45 a.m., I heard Tyler Greaves's voice booming from the elevator banks. The CEO's son. Our new Chief Transformation Strategist always announced his presence like he was walking onto a stage. 3 weeks into his tenure, and he'd already redesigned our reporting structure twice. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and picked up my employee badge. The piece of plastic felt heavier than it should have, maybe because of everything it represented. Access to systems. Years of trust. A career built on keeping this company legal and ethical. Tyler's corner office was 3 doors down from mine. His door was open, and I could see him arranging printed slides on his desk, probably for another presentation about revolutionary efficiency paradigms, or whatever buzzword salad he'd Googled that morning. I knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. "Diana." He looked up with that practiced smile that never reached his eyes. "You're here early. Did you get my email about the new compliance framework I think we can really streamline?" I placed my badge on his desk, directly on top of his slides. The plastic clicked against the glass surface. He stared at it for a moment, then looked up at me. "Is there a problem with your access I can call IT?" "No problem with access," I said. "I'm leaving." "Leaving." He leaned back in his $8,000 ergonomic chair. "Diana, if this is about the reorganization, I assure you that my position doesn't exist anymore. You made that clear when you removed me from the executive meetings. That was temporary. We're just recalibrating the leadership structure." "Tyler." I kept my voice level, professional. "We both know what's happening here. You're cleaning house, installing your people. That's your prerogative. But I won't pretend to be part of a system I no longer recognize." He picked up my badge, turning it over in his hands like he was examining an artifact. "You know you need to give 2 weeks' notice. It's in your contract." "Actually, it's not." I smiled for the first time that morning. "I wrote that contract. I know every clause, every subsection. Senior executives can resign with immediate effect under circumstances of fundamental restructuring. Section 47, paragraph 4. His jaw tightened. "You can't just walk out. You have responsibilities." "Had," past tense. I turned toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Tyler. You might want to review the continuity protocols, especially the sections about emergency succession and system access. Just a friendly suggestion from your former head of compliance." I left him sitting there, still holding my badge. In the hallway, I passed Janet from legal, who was carrying a stack of documents. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Diana," I heard shouting. No shouting, I said. Just clarity. I continued walking past the conference rooms, where I'd spent countless hours protecting this company from its own worst impulses, past the break room, where I'd mentored junior staff past the server room that housed systems I'd helped design. In the elevator, I pulled out my personal phone and sent a single text to my attorney. It's done. File at 9 a.m. sharp. The elevator descended and I watched the floor numbers count down. 15 years reduced to a 20-second elevator ride. But I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was something far more dangerous. I was prepared. As I crossed the lobby, Marcus called out, "Have a good day, Ms. Elwood." "Oh, I will, Marcus." I pushed through the revolving doors into the morning sun. "I absolutely will." Behind me in that gleaming tower, 19 executives were about to start their day. Check their emails, review their portfolios. They had no idea that in 24 hours they'd be clearing out their offices. They'd moved against the wrong person, someone who didn't just know where the bodies were buried, but had kept detailed maps of the entire cemetery. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant. Former assistant now. "Diana, what's happening? Tyler just called an emergency meeting." I didn't respond. They'd figure it out soon enough. When the auditors arrived, when the systems locked them out, when they realized that the boring compliance officer they'd pushed aside was the only thing standing between them and a forensic investigation that would unravel 3 years of creative restructuring. I hailed a cab and gave the driver my home address. As we pulled away from the curb, I took one last look at Arkason's headquarters. Somewhere up there, Tyler was probably still staring at my badge, trying to figure out what I meant about the continuity protocols. He'd learn. They all would. Because I hadn't just left my badge on his desk. I'd left a ticking time bomb in their servers, perfectly legal, completely by the book, a series of automated compliance checks that would trigger the moment my access was revoked. Checks that would flag every irregular transaction, every bypassed approval, every corner they'd cut in their rush to transform the company. The cab driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "Rough morning." "No," I said, finally allowing myself a genuine smile. "It's been a perfect morning." 3 weeks before I placed that badge on Tyler's desk, the unraveling had already begun. It started with an email sent at 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday, because of course it did. The new regime always announced their coups outside business hours when they thought no one was watching. Effective immediately, Tyler Greaves will assume the role of Chief Transformation Strategist, reporting directly to CEO Robert Greaves. We're excited about the fresh perspective he'll bring to Arkason's next chapter. Nepotism dressed up in corporate speak. I'd seen it before, but never quite so blatant. Tyler Greaves. 31 years old. Harvard MBA and a resume that mysteriously omitted his 2 failed startups and the SEC investigation at his last company. But when Daddy owns 42% of the board votes, such details become irrelevant. Monday morning came with the first casualties. Sarah Martinez, our CFO of 8 years, found her office keycard deactivated. By noon, she was gone, replaced by Tyler's former roommate from business school. The pattern was clear to anyone paying attention. I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly compliance reports when Janet knocked on my door. "Diana, did you see the meeting invite?" I had. Executive Strategic Alignment Session at 2 p.m. My name wasn't on it. "Must be an oversight," Janet said, but we both knew better. I walked to the conference room, Anyway compliance binder in hand. Tyler was at the head of the table, gesturing at a projection that looked like someone had vomited buzzwords onto a slide. "Diana," he said when I entered, his smile sharp enough to cut, "this is actually a closed session. Compliance needs to be present for any executive restructuring discussions," I said, taking a seat. "Section 12 of the Corporate Governance Policy." His jaw twitched. "We're not discussing restructuring. We're exploring transformation opportunities." Same thing, different words. I opened my binder. "Shall we continue?" The room was full of new faces, Tyler's people, all under 35, all with that hungry look of ambition without wisdom. They watched me like I was a relic in a museum. Tyler cleared his throat. "As I was saying, we need to move fast and break things. The old guard has made Arkeson too rigid, too conservative. It's time to unleash our potential. Breaking things in fintech means breaking federal regulations, I said, which carries penalties starting at $10 million per violation. One of Tyler's disciples, a woman with perfectly straightened hair and a Stanford pin, leaned forward. With respect, Diana, that's exactly the kind of outdated thinking we need to evolve past. Compliance should enable business, not hinder it. Compliance keeps you out of federal prison, Madison. I recognized her now, Madison Wu, Tyler's new VP of Innovation. But please tell me more about evolving past the Securities Exchange Act. Tyler intervened. Diana, I appreciate your passion for protocol, but perhaps your expertise would be better utilized in a more focused role. We're creating a new position, Legacy Systems Advisor. You'd help transition our historical policies to the new framework. Legacy Systems Advisor. Corporate speak for, we're putting you in a corner until you quit. I'll consider it, I said, closing my binder. In the meantime, I'll need documentation on all these transformation initiatives for the audit trail. Of course, Tyler said, but his eyes said something else entirely. I left the meeting and went straight to my office. My hands were steady as I opened my laptop and began downloading files. 15 years of building Arkeson's compliance infrastructure meant I had access to everything, every system, every database, every digital signature. By Wednesday, the purge was in full swing. Mike Harrison, head of risk management, gone. Patricia Wells, senior legal counsel, reassigned to special projects. David Kim, chief information security officer, suddenly taking an indefinite sabbatical. Each departure was surgical, handled with NDAs and severance packages that bought silence, but they couldn't buy the deletion of digital footprints. I started working different hours, arriving at 5 a.m., leaving after 9 p.m. Security noticed but said nothing. I was still Diana Elwood, the woman who'd saved Arkeson from 3 different federal investigations. That still counted for something, even if the executive suite had forgotten. On Thursday evening, I found something interesting. A folder on the shared drive buried under 7 layers of subdirectories, Project Phoenix. Inside were Tyler's real plans. Not the sanitized versions he showed the board, but the actual blueprints for dismantling our compliance infrastructure. Post-governance decision-making model, one document called it. Translation: we do whatever we want and worry about the law later. I was reading through the 5th revision when my Slack chimed. Alan Morrison, one of the last remaining original executives. Diana, you seeing what I'm seeing? Depends what you're looking at. Check your personal email. I did. Alan had sent a forwarded message chain between Tyler and an external consulting firm. They were planning to outsource compliance to a company in Delaware, a company that after 30 seconds of research, I discovered was owned by Tyler's former business partner. We need to talk, I typed back. Can't. I'm in Tokyo. But Diana, they're moving faster than we thought. Whatever you're planning, do it soon. Whatever I was planning. As if I'd already decided. But Alan knew me well enough to know that I didn't survive 15 years in corporate America by being passive. Friday afternoon, Tyler made his next move. An all-hands email about reimagining Arkeson's operational excellence. Buried in paragraph 4 was the real message: the compliance department would be right-sized for efficiency, starting Monday. My team started appearing at my door within minutes. Diana, what does right-sized mean? Asked James, one of my senior analysts. It means update your LinkedIn, I said. All of you, this weekend. But can they do this? We have contracts. They can do whatever they want, James. The question is whether they'll get away with it. That night I stayed until midnight, methodically copying files to encrypted drives. Not stealing, never stealing. Just preserving. Creating backups of the systems I'd built, the policies I'd written, the safeguards I'd installed. Tyler found me there, making his own late-night rounds. He leaned against my doorframe, trying for casual. Burning the midnight oil. Protecting your father's investment, I replied without looking up. My father trusts me to handle things. Your father trusts his money to stay clean. There's a difference. He stepped into my office. Diana, I'm not the enemy here. I'm trying to build something new, something better. You could be part of it if I just would ignore the law. Pretend I don't see the conflicts of interest. Look the other way while you funnel contracts to your friends. His face darkened. Be careful, Diana. Accusations like that aren't accusations when they're documented facts. I finally looked at him. Delaware LLC, ring a bell, Kappa Consulting. For the first time since he'd arrived, Tyler Greaves looked uncertain. I don't know what you think you know. I know everything, Tyler. Everything you've done. Everything you're planning to do. The question is whether you're smart enough to stop before it's too late. He straightened his tie, composing himself. Monday morning, HR will have a new org chart. You might want to prepare your team for the transition. After he left, I sat in the dark for a long moment. Then I picked up my phone and made a call. Margaret, it's Diana. Yes, I know it's late. Remember that favor you owe me from the Stockton audit? I'm calling it in. Margaret Zhao was the senior partner at one of the Big Four audit firms. More importantly, she was someone who understood that compliance wasn't just about following rules, it was about protecting the entire system from people who thought they were above it. What do you need? She asked. A full forensic audit team, on standby, Monday morning. Diana, what are you planning? I looked out at the city lights, thinking about all the people whose pensions were invested in Arcason, all the employees who'd built careers here, all the regulations that kept the financial system from becoming a free-for-all. I'm planning to save this company, I said, whether it wants to be saved or not. The Monday after Tyler's weekend threat, I watched from my office as his transformation team colonized the executive floor. They moved in like an invasion force, young faces with designer suits and wireless earbuds, carrying Surface tablets instead of briefcases. The future of finance according to Tyler's vision. By 9 a.m., they'd commandeered the main conference room and covered every wall with their innovation frameworks. I caught glimpses through the glass flow charts that looked like abstract art acronyms that meant nothing, and at the center of it all, a projection titled Post-Governance Decision Matrix. I'd been in corporate America long enough to recognize bullshit dressed up as brilliance. But this was different. This was dangerous. James knocked on my door at 9:30. Diana, they're asking for all our compliance documentation. Everything. Who's asking? Madison Wu. She says they need to baseline our current state before transformation. I pulled up our shared drive. Tell Madison she can submit a formal request through the proper channels. Form C-47. She'll find it in the Compliance Manual Section 8. She said Tyler authorized. Tyler isn't a signatory on compliance documents, yet. I turned back to my screen. Form C-47 James. Make her fill it out in triplicate. Bureaucracy could be a weapon when wielded correctly. It would buy me time. At 11 a.m., the first new system went live. An agile workflow platform that bypassed 3 levels of approval for transactions under 10 million. I got the notification on my compliance dashboard, a red flag that might as well have been a fire alarm. I called Tom Bradley in IT. Tom, did you authorize the new transaction system? What new system keyboard clicks in the background? Holy shit, Diana. Someone's running parallel infrastructure. This isn't going through our security protocols. Can you trace who implemented it? Already on it. Okay, this is interesting. The credentials trace back to Kappa Consulting, but they're using our internal APIs. Kappa Consulting, Tyler's shadow company. I screenshot everything. By lunch, Tyler's team had produced their first innovation, a new vendor management system that would streamline partnerships through automated trust networks. Translation, they wanted to hire contractors without background checks. I was reviewing their proposal when Margaret Zhao called. Diana, I've been doing some digging on your situation. Are you aware that Arcason is about to file an amended charter? My blood went cold. What kind of amendments? The kind that restructures board voting rights and eliminates several oversight positions, including yours. When? Filing deadline is Friday. But Diana, there's something else. Buried in the amendments is a clause about assumed continuity override. Ring any bells? I minimized my current screen and pulled up our legal database. Give me a second. Christ. Margaret, that's from the 2009 Crisis Protocols. Emergency powers that bypass normal governance. Exactly. If they get this through, they can operate without oversight for 90 days, long enough to gut every protection we've built. Diana, you need to stop this. I know. I was already thinking 3 moves ahead. Margaret, how fast can your team move? How fast do you need us? Friday, maybe sooner. We'll be ready. After hanging up, I locked my door and opened a file I'd been building for 2 weeks. Every questionable decision, every bypassed protocol, every conflict of interest documented with receipts. But I needed more. I needed the smoking gun. At 2 p.m., Tyler held an all-hands for the compliance department. My team sat around the conference table looking like defendants at a trial. Tyler stood at the head, Madison Wu at his right hand, spinning his vision. Compliance as we know it is dead, he announced. We're not going to be the Department of No anymore. We're going to be enablement partners. What does that mean exactly? Asked Patricia Wong, one of my senior managers. Madison jumped in. It means pre-approved frameworks, retroactive documentation, trust-based verification instead of restrictive pre-screening. That sounds like we're doing compliance after the fact, Patricia said. That's exactly what we're doing, Tyler said, as if it were brilliant instead of insane. Post-governance decision-making. Act first, optimize for compliance later. I finally spoke. What you're describing violates 12 federal regulations and would expose Arkeson to unlimited liability. Tyler's smile was patronizing. Diana, I respect your expertise, but you're thinking in old paradigms. Madison, show them the velocity framework. Madison clicked to a new slide. It was a circular diagram with arrows pointing in every direction labeled with terms like dynamic compliance and regulatory agility. This is nonsense, I said flatly. You can't be agile with federal law. Can't, Tyler raised an eyebrow. Or won't. This is exactly the rigid thinking that's holding Arkeson back, which is why effective immediately we're restructuring the compliance function. He clicked to the next slide, an org chart with Madison Wu as Chief Transformation Officer overseeing a compliance innovation lab. My name was in a small box off to the side, Legacy Advisory. Anyone who wants to be part of the future can apply for positions in the new structure, Tyler continued. Anyone who doesn't, well, we appreciate your past contributions. My team looked at me waiting for guidance. I stood slowly. Tyler, before you implement this, you should know about Section 7B of the corporate charter. He frowned. What about it? The section that requires board approval for any fundamental changes to compliance structure. The section that specifically names the head of compliance as a protected position changeable only by 2/3 board vote. We have board approval. You have your father's approval. That's 1 vote. Madison shuffled through her papers. The board delegated transformation authority to modify operational procedures, not governance structures. I walked to the whiteboard and wrote 3 numbers, 7B4. Continuity of critical functions provision. Written after the 2009 crisis, specifically to prevent what you're trying to do. Tyler's face was reddening. You're grasping at technicalities. I'm citing the legal framework that keeps this company solvent. But please continue with your innovation lab. I'm sure the SEC will find it fascinating. I left them there and returned to my office. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anger. Clean, focused anger. At 4 p.m., I got an encrypted message from Alan Morrison in Tokyo. Check the vendor payment system. Now. I logged in and found chaos. Dozens of new vendors added in the past hour, all approved through the Velocity framework. No background checks, no verification, just automated approvals. Money was already flowing, 50,000 here, 100,000 there. I traced the vendor names. Shell companies, all of them. Registered in Delaware, all in the past month, all with connections to addresses I recognized from my research on Kappa Consulting. They weren't just dismantling compliance. They were looting the company. I picked up my phone and made another call, this time to Robert Greaves himself. His secretary tried to deflect, but I used the magic words, "Tell him it's about his son and a federal investigation." Robert took the call within 30 seconds. "Diana, what's this about?" "Robert, I need 5 minutes of your time, in person, tonight." "I'm busy." "Your son is about to destroy everything you've built. 5 minutes." A pause. "My office, 7 p.m. I spent the next 2 hours preparing. Not just documents, but strategy. Robert Greaves was old school. He understood leverage and consequences. But he was also a father. This would require surgical precision. At 6:45, I printed everything. 300 pages of evidence. Then I locked my office knowing I might never see it again. Tyler was waiting by the elevators. "Going somewhere." "Board meeting," I said. "There's no board meeting scheduled." "There is now." I stepped into the elevator. He followed. "Diana, whatever you think you're doing." "I'm doing my job, Tyler. Protecting this company, even from itself." "My father won't listen to you." "Your father built this company from nothing. He'll listen to anyone who can help him keep it." The elevator climbed toward the penthouse. Tyler was texting frantically, probably warning his father. Good. Let Robert be prepared. It would save time. As the floors ticked by, I thought about the badge in my pocket, the one I'd carry for 3 more days before placing it on Tyler's desk. But first I had seeds to plant, truths to tell, systems to activate. Tyler thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize I'd already won the game. The elevator dinged. Penthouse floor. Time to light the fuse. The smoking gun was hiding in metadata. It always is. People forget that every document tells 2 stories, what it says and how it came to be. I discovered it at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, 3 days after my meeting with Robert Greaves. The meeting had gone exactly as expected. Robert listened politely. Tyler made excuses and nothing changed. But I'd planted the seeds of doubt, and sometimes that's all you need. Back in my office, I was reviewing the amended charter documents when something caught my eye. The timestamp on the assumed continuity override clause, February 12, 2009, 3:47 p.m. I knew that timestamp. It was burned into my memory because I'd been in the room when it was created. A crisis meeting during the financial meltdown when Arkeson was hemorrhaging money and needed emergency powers to survive. But here's the thing, the clause had been explicitly sunset. It expired December 31, 2009. Yet here it was embedded in new documents as if it were still valid. I opened the document properties. Last modified by tgreaves@arkeson.com. But the interesting part was 3 layers deep in the metadata. Original author, consulting legal. Creation date January 15, 2025. They hadn't just copied an old provision. They'd recreated it word for word in a new document, trying to pass it off as existing policy. I pulled up the original 2009 document from our archives. Not the digital copy, anyone could alter that. The scanned PDF of the signed paper document uploaded to our compliance vault with blockchain verification. Immutable. Side by side, the differences were subtle but damning. The new version had changed temporary emergency powers to assumed emergency powers. Board oversight required became board oversight as deemed necessary. Small edits that transformed a crisis tool into a blank check. But the masterpiece was in Section 7B. The original specified that the continuity officer, my position, had veto power over emergency provisions. The new version, that power belonged to the Chief Transformation Officer, a position that didn't exist until Tyler created it for Madison Wu. I leaned back in my chair, admiration mixing with disgust. It was elegant in its deception. Use a real crisis provision, modify it just enough, bury it in hundreds of pages of amendments. Who would check the original? Who even remembered 2009? I did. I started building my comparison document. Every alteration highlighted every change, annotated with the legal implications. Then I dug deeper into the metadata following digital breadcrumbs. The document had been routed through an external server before being uploaded to Arcuson's system. The IP traced to Delaware, Kappa Consulting's registered address. But then I found something even better. In their haste to implement the changes, they'd forgotten to remove tracked changes from one version. Hidden in the document's review history were comments. Madison Wu arguing with someone identified only as JH about specific wording. JH wanted more aggressive language. Madison pushed back, warning about exposure. JH: I searched our systems and found nothing. Expanded to Kappa Consulting's corporate filings. Jason Hendricks, Tyler's business partner from his failed fintech startup, the one that had attracted SEC attention. Now I had the full picture. This wasn't just Tyler empire building. It was a coordinated takeover using Arcuson as a piggy bank for their next venture. I worked through the night building an airtight case. Every document printed and annotated, every connection mapped, every legal violation cataloged. By 5 a.m., I had a 3-inch binder that could destroy careers. But I needed one more piece. The original 2009 documents weren't just in our system. They were filed with the state. Public record if you knew where to look. I drove to the Secretary of State's office, arriving when they opened at 8 a.m. The clerk, an older woman named Dolores, recognized me from previous visits. Ms. Elwood, what brings you here so early? I need to verify some historical corporate documents. 2009 amendments for Arcuson Corp. She led me to the archive room. Physical documents, some people called them outdated. I called them unchangeable truth. It took an hour to find the right box. When I opened the folder, my hands actually trembled. There it was, the original assumed continuity override provision. And at the bottom, signatures. The board of directors, the corporate secretary, and crucially, the expiration clause. Bold, underlined, and initialed by every signatory. These emergency provisions expire December 31, 2009, and cannot be renewed without unanimous board consent. Unanimous. Not majority, not 2/3, unanimous. I photographed every page with my phone, then requested certified copies. Dolores raised an eyebrow at the stack. Something important. You could say that. Back at the office, Tyler was holding court in the main conference room. I could see him through the glass, gesticulating at a presentation about paradigm shifts in regulatory philosophy. His audience of fresh MBAs hung on every word. I knocked and entered without waiting. Diana. Tyler's smile was sharp. We're in the middle of... I need 5 minutes. Can it wait? No. I set my binder on the table. It's about the assumed continuity override. The room went silent. Madison Wu's face drained of color. Tyler recovered quickly. I don't see how that's relevant to our innovation workshop. Section 7B of your amended charter, the provision that gives you emergency powers, it's fraudulent. That's a serious accusation. It's a statement of fact. I opened the binder to the first tab. The original provision expired in 2009. Your version, created last month by Kappa Consulting, attempts to resurrect it without board approval. Madison stood. We should discuss this privately. Sit down, Madison. I turned to the next tab. Would you like to explain why Kappa Consulting is writing Arcuson's corporate documents? Or should we start with why Jason Hendricks, who's banned from securities trading, is commenting on our governance structure? Tyler had gone very still. How did you... Metadata, Tyler. It remembers everything. I flipped through more pages. Every document you've submitted, every vendor you've approved, every dollar you've routed to shell companies, it's all here. One of the MBAs raised a tentative hand. Should we... leave? Stay, I said. You should know who you're working for. Tyler, would you like to tell them about the SEC investigation at your last company? Or how about the $2 million that's been transferred to Kappa accounts in the past week? Tyler's face had gone from red to white. You're fired, Diana. Security will... I don't work for you, Tyler. I work for Arcuson Corporation. My position is charter protected. Remember, only the board can remove me. The full board. I closed the binder. which meets tomorrow at 9 a.m. emergency session. They'll be very interested in this documentation. My father. Your father received his copy an hour ago, along with the external auditors, the SEC whistleblower hotline, and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. The room was tomb silent. Madison was typing frantically on her phone. Tyler stood frozen, his transformation presentation still glowing behind him. Oh, and Tyler. I picked up my binder. The continuity officer has emergency powers too. Real ones, not fraudulent ones. As of this morning, all non-essential spending is frozen pending audit. All new vendor accounts are locked. All system access is under review. You can't. Section 9C of the Real Charter. Crisis Management Protocols. I can, and I have. I headed for the door, then paused. Your innovation workshop is canceled. I'd suggest you all update your resumes. I left them there and walked back to my office. My phone was already ringing reporters, lawyers, board members. I ignored them all. There would be time for that circus tomorrow. Instead, I sat at my desk and pulled up the compliance dashboard. Every system I'd built over 15 years was still there, still protecting the company, still doing exactly what it was designed to do. Tyler thought he could dismantle it all with buzzwords and bravado. He'd learned the hard way that infrastructure fights back. I opened my desk drawer and looked at my employee badge. 3 more days until I'd place it on Tyler's desk. 3 more days of watching the walls close in on him and his conspirators. But the real satisfaction wasn't in the revenge. It was in knowing that every pension fund invested in Arkeson, every employee who'd built a career here, every regulation that kept the market honest, they were all still protected. Because that's what compliance really is. Not a department of no, but a department of not on my watch. Tyler was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Metadata never lies, and neither do I. The red folder sat in my bottom desk drawer like a loaded weapon. I'd started building it the day Tyler arrived, some instinct telling me I'd need insurance. Now, 3 weeks later, it had grown thick with evidence printouts, screenshots, email chains, transaction records. Each document meticulously organized, cross-referenced, and verified. But a folder full of papers wasn't enough. I needed allies. More importantly, I needed allies who understood that this wasn't about office politics or personal vendettas. This was about preventing a carefully orchestrated heist. I started with Maria Santos in internal audit. Maria was 62, 6 months from retirement, and had zero patience for corporate bullshit. I found her in her office at 6:30 a.m., already deep in spreadsheets. Diana. She looked up over her reading glasses. Let me guess. Tyler Greaves. I closed her door. How bad is it from your end? Bad. She swiveled her monitor toward me. 23 new vendor accounts in 2 weeks, all approved through this new velocity framework. No documentation, no verification, just Tyler or Madison's digital signature. Can you trace the money? Some of it. But Diana, they're smart. Small amounts, multiple transfers, everything just under the reporting thresholds. She pulled up another screen. Except for this one. $2 million to something called Phoenix Holdings. Ring any bells? Phoenix, as in Project Phoenix, Tyler's transformation initiative. Delaware company. Of course. Incorporated January 8th. Guess who the registered agent is? Kappa Consulting. Bingo. Maria leaned back. Diana, I've been doing this for 30 years. This isn't transformation. It's theft. I set a flash drive on her desk. Everything I have is on here. Can you build a financial trail? She pocketed the drive. Give me 48 hours. And Diana, watch your back. People who steal millions don't like witnesses. My next stop was legal. Not the new kids Tyler had brought in, but Catherine Phillips, Deputy General Counsel, who'd been with Arkeson since the IPO. I found her in the law library, a room Tyler's team probably didn't even know existed. Diana. She didn't look up from her research. I was wondering when you'd come. You know what's happening. I know our new Chief Transformation Officer tried to file amended articles of incorporation without legal review. I know she's citing provisions that expired 15 years ago. And I know someone's been accessing our legal databases at 2 a.m. using admin credentials that shouldn't exist. I pulled out a chair. Catherine, I need help understanding something. The continuity officer provisions, are they as ironclad as I think? She finally looked at me and I saw fury in her eyes. Diana, your position isn't just protected. It's integral to our federal compliance agreements. Remove you without cause, and we trigger automatic reviews from every regulatory body that oversees us. What about the emergency powers? Section 9C. She smiled grimly. Robert Greaves insisted on that after 2009. The continuity officer becomes the ultimate arbiter during governance crises. You could literally freeze the entire company if you deemed it necessary. How long would it take them to challenge it? Minimum 90 days through the courts. Longer if you have documented cause. She paused. Which I assume you do. I thought about the red folder. Extensively documented. Then you're untouchable, which is why they're trying to eliminate the position entirely. That evening I worked late again, but this time I wasn't alone. Tom Bradley from IT had quietly assigned himself as my technical backup running traces on every suspicious transaction. Janet from my team was cross-referencing vendor contracts. Even Marcus, the security guard, made extra rounds past my office. Word had spread through the unofficial networks, the administrative assistants, the IT staff, the people who actually made Arcuson function. Tyler might have his MBAs and consultants, but I had something more valuable: people who understood how the company really worked. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Diana Elwood. Speaking. This is Agent Sarah Coleman, FBI Financial Crimes Division. I understand you've submitted a whistleblower complaint. My heart rate spiked. I have. We'd like to discuss your documentation. Can you meet tomorrow morning quietly? Where? There's a coffee shop on 3rd Avenue, the Grindhouse, 7 a.m. After she hung up, I sat in the dark for a moment. Once I talked to the FBI, there was no going back. This would escalate beyond corporate maneuvering into criminal investigation. I pulled out the red folder and added one more document, a timeline I'd been maintaining. Every meeting, every transaction, every policy change. 3 weeks of systematic dismantling, all leading to tomorrow's board meeting where they plan to eliminate my position and give themselves carte blanche. My desk phone rang. Internal number. Diana. It was Robert Greaves. Can you come to my office? It was 9:30 p.m. The executive floor was empty except for security. Robert's corner office blazed with light. He was standing at his window looking out at the city. On his desk was a printout of my documentation. 15 years, he said without turning. You've been protecting this company for 15 years. That's my job. Even from my son. I chose my words carefully, especially from people who think they're above the rules. He turned then and I saw a man who'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. Is it as bad as these documents suggest? It's worse. What I've documented is just what they've done openly. The FBI will find more. The FBI. He sank into his chair. Diana, he's my son. And he's stealing from your company, from your shareholders, from every employee who trusted Arcuson with their future. Robert picked up the timeline. $2 million to Phoenix Holdings. That we can trace. There's probably more through channels we haven't found yet. What do you want, Diana? I want the board to know the truth before they vote on anything tomorrow. I want the audit committee to have full access to all systems. And I want the continuity officer provisions enforced as written. You want to keep your job. No. I met his eyes. I want to do my job. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, the board meeting tomorrow. You'll present your findings. If you'll let me. Diana, I built this company from nothing. I won't let anyone destroy it. Not even my own blood. He stood. 9 a.m. Full presentation. Whatever you need. I left his office feeling something I hadn't expected: sympathy. Robert Greaves was learning what every parent of a criminal eventually learns, that love and justice don't always align. Back in my office, I made final preparations. Copies of everything went to my personal attorney. Another set to Margaret Zhao's audit team. A third set locked in my desk, the red folder that started it all. At midnight, I finally headed home. Tomorrow would bring chaos, FBI interviews, board meetings, probably lawyers descending like locusts. Tyler's house of cards would collapse, taking his conspirators with him. But I'd done my job. I'd protected the company even from itself. As I waited for the elevator, my phone chimed. A text from an unknown number: "You should have taken the legacy advisory position." I deleted it without responding. Threats didn't scare me. I had something more powerful than fear. I had 15 years of infrastructure, properly documented processes, and the kind of boring, meticulous attention to detail that made criminals slip up. Tyler thought he was a disruptor. Tomorrow he'd learn that some things shouldn't be disrupted. Like federal law, like fiduciary duty, like the difference between innovation and theft. The elevator arrived. As the doors closed, I allowed myself a small smile. In 12 hours, Tyler Greaves would walk into that board meeting thinking he was about to complete his takeover. Instead, he'd walk into an ambush built from his own arrogance and my red folder full of facts. Some people counted sheep to fall asleep. That night, I counted Tyler's legal violations. I stopped at 47, but only because sleep finally took me. Tomorrow would be a very interesting day. The boardroom at Arkeson occupied the entire northeast corner of the 42nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 30, and portraits of every CEO since the company's founding. It was designed to impress and intimidate. At 8:45 a.m., it was also unexpectedly crowded. I arrived to find Tyler's transformation team already setting up. Madison Wu was arranging printed slide decks at each seat, while two assistants tested the projection system. Tyler himself stood at the head of the table, hands planted on the polished wood like he owned it. "Diana." His smile was all teeth. "Early as always." "I was invited," I said, setting my boxes of documentation on the side table. "About that," Madison stepped forward. "The agenda's been revised. Your item has been moved to the end, if there's time." "The chairman sets the agenda," I said evenly, "not the chief transformation officer." "Actually," Tyler interjected, "as of this morning, I'm acting CEO. Dad's taking a medical leave." I felt the ground shift under my feet. Medical leave. Stress-related. Doctor's orders. He asked me to step in temporarily. Tyler pulled out a letter on Arkeson letterhead. "Effective immediately." I recognized Robert's signature, but something was off. The letter was dated yesterday, but Robert had seemed fine when we met. Stressed, yes, but hardly incapacitated. "How convenient," I said. "Isn't it?" Tyler's smile widened. "Now, as acting CEO, I've revised today's agenda. We'll be voting on the restructuring first. Your concerns can wait." The board members began arriving at 8:55. I knew most of them had protected their interests for 15 years. But as they took their seats, I noticed they avoided my eyes. Only Eleanor Hastings, the longest-serving board member, gave me a slight nod. Margaret Zhao entered at 8:59, followed by two associates carrying banker's boxes. Tyler frowned. "Ms. Zhao, this is a closed session." "I'm here at the invitation of the audit committee," Margaret replied smoothly. "Ms. Hastings." Eleanor stood. "I've asked Zhao and Associates to present preliminary findings from an emergency audit. Given recent concerns about governance—" "There are no concerns," Tyler cut in. "We're implementing industry best practices." "Mr. Greaves," Eleanor's voice could have frozen fire, "you may be acting CEO, but you are not a board member. Please sit down." Tyler's face flushed, but he sat. Madison started to speak, but Eleanor silenced her with a look. "Now then," Eleanor continued, "before we discuss any restructuring, I believe Ms. Elwood has documentation to present." I stood my heart steady despite everything. "Thank you. Directors, what I'm about to show you." The boardroom door burst open. 3 men in dark suits entered, followed by Agent Sarah Coleman, whom I recognized from her voice. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, not sounding sorry at all. FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant to secure all documents related to Arkason's vendor management and approval processes. Chaos erupted. Board members shouted questions. Madison Wu went pale as paper. Tyler stood so fast his chair toppled. "This is harassment," he shouted. "My father will—" "Your father is in federal custody," Agent Coleman said calmly. "He's cooperating fully with our investigation into embezzlement and wire fraud." The room went silent. I felt my knees weaken. Robert arrested, that didn't make sense. He was many things but not a thief. Eleanor Hastings was the first to recover. "Agent Coleman, there must be some mistake. Robert Greaves made the mistake of trying to protect his son." Coleman pulled out a tablet. "Last night at 10:47 p.m., Robert Greaves attempted to transfer $8 million to a Cayman Islands account. He was intercepted at JFK Airport." "That's impossible," I said. "I met with him at 9:30. He was in his office." "Until 11 p.m., according to building security," Coleman finished. "Ms. Elwood, we know you've been documenting irregularities. We'd like to compare your findings with what Mr. Greaves Sr. confessed." Tyler had gone from red to white to gray. "Confessed to what?" Coleman consulted her tablet. "To establishing Phoenix Holdings, to routing Arkason funds through Kappa Consulting, to planning to liquidate assets before the board discovered the missing money. Should I continue?" "He's protecting me," Tyler whispered. "The stupid old man is trying to protect me." "No," I said, understanding flooding through me. "He's protecting the company." Everyone turned to look at me. Robert knew the investigation was coming, knew Tyler would be implicated, so he took the blame himself. Made it look like Tyler was just a patsy following orders. I met Tyler's shocked gaze. "He's giving you a way out." "I don't need a way out. I didn't do anything wrong." Tyler's voice cracked. "It was just restructuring innovation. I wasn't stealing." "Mr. Greaves," Agent Coleman interrupted, "I'd advise you to stop talking and contact an attorney." Madison Wu was already edging toward the door, but an agent blocked her path. Margaret Zhao cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should see Ms. Elwood's documentation now. It might clarify the situation." I opened my first box. "Directors, for the past 3 weeks I've documented systematic attempts to bypass Arkason's financial controls. For the next hour I laid out everything. Every falsified document, every shell company, every illegal transfer." The board sat in stunned silence as I showed them how their company had nearly been hollowed out from the inside. Tyler tried to interrupt twice. Both times Agent Coleman suggested he remain quiet. When I finished, Eleanor Hastings spoke first. "Ms. Elwood, in your professional opinion, what's our exposure? Assuming we cooperate fully with federal authorities and implement immediate remediation minimal. The money can be recovered. The damage to reputation, that's another matter. And if we hadn't discovered this," I looked at Tyler. "Complete collapse within 6 months. Bankruptcy, federal prosecution, shareholder lawsuits. Arkason would have ceased to exist." "But you did discover it," Eleanor said softly. "You protected us, again." Agent Coleman stood. "We'll need all documentation transferred to our custody. Ms. Elwood, you'll be deposed as a witness. Mr. Greaves, Ms. Wu, please come with us." As the FBI led Tyler and Madison out, Tyler turned back to me. "This is your fault. You could have just accepted the new structure. Could have been part of something revolutionary." "I was part of something better," I said. "I was part of keeping 30,000 employees from losing their jobs because you wanted to play startup founder with other people's money." He was still shouting accusations as the agents escorted him to the elevator. The boardroom slowly emptied until only Eleanor Hastings, Margaret Zhao, and I remained. "Diana," Eleanor said quietly, "the board will need an interim CEO, someone who understands the company, who has the trust of regulators and employees." "No," I shook my head. "I'm not an executive. I'm a compliance officer." "The best one we've ever had." She studied me. "Stay on, Diana. Help us rebuild. Your terms, your structure." I thought about my badge sitting in my desk drawer, about the resignation I'd planned, about walking away from 15 years of work. I need the continuity officer position strengthened, I said finally. Independent budget, direct report to the board, veto power over any structural changes. Done. And I want a forensic review of every hire Tyler made, every contract he signed, every system he implemented. Agreed. One more thing. I met Eleanor's eyes. When Robert gets out, because he will get out, he can never hold an officer position again. No exceptions. Eleanor's face was sad but resolute. I'll make the motion myself. As I packed up my documentation evidence now for a federal case instead of a corporate one, Margaret Zhao touched my shoulder. You know what the real irony is, she said. Tyler was right about one thing. Arkeson did need transformation, just not his kind. I looked around the boardroom where 3 weeks of corporate warfare had just ended. We'll transform, but we'll do it legally, ethically, the boring way. The Diana Elwood way. The right way. I left the boardroom carrying empty boxes. The FBI had taken everything, my red folder, my timeline, 3 weeks of meticulous documentation. But I didn't need it anymore. The evidence would do its work in court now. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and deleted the resignation letter I'd drafted. Then I texted my team, all hands meeting at 2 p.m. We have a company to rebuild. Tyler thought he was a visionary. Robert thought he was a father protecting his son. But I knew I was a guardian of boring necessary systems that kept the world from falling apart. And I was very, very good at my job. The audit team read Section 7B like it was a death sentence. Harold Morrison, the lead external auditor, adjusted his glasses for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Ms. Elwood, am I understanding this correctly? The continuity officer has unilateral authority to freeze all non-essential operations during a governance crisis. That's correct. I stood at the side of the boardroom, watching the remaining directors absorb the implications. The provision was added after 2009 specifically to prevent panic liquidation during leadership transitions. And you're invoking this now. As of 8:47 this morning, when Tyler Greaves claimed the acting CEO position under questionable circumstances, I gestured to Margaret Zhao. Ms. Zhao can speak to the timeline. Margaret stood pulling up a document on the main screen. Robert Greaves's medical leave letter was drafted at 11:14 p.m. last night after his arrest at JFK. The timestamp indicates it was created on Tyler Greaves's laptop using Robert's cached credentials. A murmur ran through the room. Eleanor Hastings leaned forward. He forged his father's signature. Digitally authenticated using saved passwords, Margaret confirmed. Technically valid in our system, but legally fraudulent. Harold Morrison was typing furiously on his laptop. This triggers immediate SEC notification requirements. Every transaction approved under Tyler's alleged authority is void, I finished, which is why I invoked Section 7B at 8:55 this morning the moment I suspected the documentation was falsified. The room erupted. Board members who'd been silent started asking rapid-fire questions. General Counsel Catherine Phillips was already on her phone with outside attorneys. Through it all, I remained calm. This was what 15 years of preparation looked like, knowing exactly which lever to pull when the machinery started breaking down. Eleanor gavelled for order. Ms. Elwood, what exactly does this freeze entail? I pulled up the compliance dashboard on the main screen. As of 9 a.m., all discretionary spending is suspended. New vendor payments are blocked. Hiring is frozen. Access to financial systems is limited to essential personnel only. For how long? Until the board appoints legitimate leadership and the audit committee certifies that all irregular transactions have been reversed. Harold Morrison looked up from his laptop. My God, the system actually worked. That's what it was designed to do, I said. Protect the company from itself. Agent Coleman, who'd been observing from the back of the room, stepped forward. Ms. Elwood, we'll need your system logs from this morning. The authentication trails the timestamp data. Already preserved and copied to secure servers. I handed her a drive. Chain of custody documentation is included. She looked impressed despite herself. You were expecting this. I was expecting something. When you've done this job long enough, you develop instincts. The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. The audit team dove into Arkason's systems like digital archaeologists excavating 3 weeks of Tyler's innovations. What they found was worse than even I'd documented. 57 vendors added to the approval matrix, Harold announced. Total approved spending $12.3 million. How much actually transferred? Eleanor asked. $4.7 million. The rest was scheduled for today. He looked at me. Your freeze caught them mid-heist. Catherine Phillips hung up her phone. I've got 17 law firms calling. Word's already out that Tyler and Madison were arrested. The stock will tank when markets open Monday. Maybe not, Eleanor said thoughtfully. She looked at me. Diana, how quickly can you prepare a statement? Something that shows the system worked, that Arkason's controls prevented the theft. I don't do PR, I said. No, but you do truth, and right now the truth is our best asset. While the lawyers and auditors continued their forensics, I drafted a simple statement. No corporate speak, no spin. Just facts: attempted theft. Discovered perpetrators, arrested, money recovered, systems functioned as designed. Add one more line, Eleanor suggested, reading over my shoulder. Arkason's compliance infrastructure, built over 15 years, proved stronger than those who tried to circumvent it. At 2 p.m., the audit team made another discovery. Jason Hendricks, Tyler's shadow partner, had been more than just an advisor. He'd been the architect. Look at this. Margaret Zhao pulled up an encrypted folder they'd recovered. Detailed plans dating back 6 months. They called it Project Harvest. I read through the documents feeling sick. Every weakness in our system mapped. Every trust relationship identified for exploitation. Even profiles of employees they thought could be corrupted or pushed out. My name was at the top of the list: primary obstacle, eliminate within 30 days. They never expected you to fight back, Eleanor observed. Their entire plan assumed you'd take that legacy advisory role and fade away quietly. They didn't know me very well, I said. Harold Morrison interrupted. We found something else. Tyler wasn't just stealing money. He was stealing data. Customer lists, trading algorithms, proprietary models. All copied to Kappa consulting servers. Industrial espionage on top of embezzlement, Catherine muttered. The FBI is going to have a field day. By 4 p.m., the full scope was clear. Tyler's transformation hadn't been about improving Arkason. It had been about gutting it, selling the valuable pieces to competitors, and leaving a shell that would collapse while he and his partners profited from the destruction. Vampire capitalism, Eleanor said with disgust. Drain the blood and move on to the next victim. Except the victim had antibodies, I said. 15 years' worth of bureaucracy and boring compliance protocols that nobody thought mattered. Agent Coleman returned at 5 p.m. with updates. Robert Greaves is cooperating fully. He's provided passwords, identified accounts, even given us recordings of his son planning this. He knew for about a week and was trying to find a way to stop it without destroying Tyler. And when he couldn't, he tried to take the fall, make it look like Tyler was just following orders. She shook her head. Fathers and sons. Gets messy when crime becomes a family business. The board reconvened at 6 p.m. for emergency votes. Eleanor Hastings was elected interim CEO. The audit committee was given expanded powers. And my position, the continuity officer role that Tyler had tried to eliminate, was not just preserved but expanded. Ms. Elwood, Eleanor said formally, the board unanimously requests that you accept the position of Chief Compliance and Integrity Officer, reporting directly to the board with the authorities outlined in Section 7B and Section 9C of our charter. I thought about my badge still sitting in my desk drawer, about the resignation I'd planned, about walking away from all of this. I accept, I said, on condition that we review and strengthen every control that Tyler managed to circumvent. This can never happen again. Agreed. Your first task. I looked around the room at the exhausted faces board members who'd thought they were attending a routine meeting, auditors, who'd uncovered a massive fraud lawyers preparing for years of litigation. My first task is to unfreeze operations for legitimate business. Employees need to be paid. Real vendors need their invoices processed. The company needs to function. I pulled up the compliance dashboard. I can begin selective unfreezing tonight. Full operations restored within 72 hours pending verification. Do it, Eleanor said. As the room emptied, Harold Morrison approached me. You know what amazes me? Tyler had MBAs from Harvard, consultants from McKinsey, all these brilliant minds helping him, and they were all defeated by boring protocols and an obsessive attention to detail, I suggested. By someone who gave a damn, he corrected. Your systems didn't stop them, Diana. You did. The systems just gave you the tools. After everyone left, I sat alone in the boardroom, watching the sun set over the city. Somewhere out there, Tyler Greaves was sitting in federal custody, probably still believing he was a visionary brought down by small minds. Madison Wu was likely negotiating a plea deal. Jason Hendricks was probably trying to flee the country. And Robert Greaves. He was learning what happened when love clouded judgment, when protecting family meant betraying everyone else who depended on you. My phone buzzed. A text from my team. Heard the news? We're all staying late. Whatever you need. I smiled. Tyler had thought he was building the future with his innovation labs and transformation initiatives. But the real future was built on something much less glamorous. People who showed up did their jobs and refused to let the system fail. I stood and gathered my things. Tomorrow would bring more chaos: press releases, employee meetings, regulatory filings. But tonight, I had work to do. Systems to unfreeze, operations to restore, a company to save. The boring way, the right way. The Diana Elwood way. I knocked on the boardroom door at 9:20 a.m., exactly as requested. But when I entered, the scene was nothing like I'd expected. The room was packed. Not just board members, but senior executives, department heads, even some faces I didn't recognize. At the head of the table sat Eleanor Hastings, looking grim. Beside her, Harold Morrison from the audit team was furiously typing on his laptop. Diana, Eleanor's voice was steel. Sit. We have a situation. I took the empty chair across from her, my red folder tight in my hands. What's happened? Tyler's been released on bail, Catherine Phillips said. His lawyer filed an emergency injunction against the Section 7B freeze. Claims you exceeded your authority. On what grounds? That the continuity officer provision expired with the 2009 amendments. She slid a legal filing across the table. They're saying you're operating under defunct rules. I opened my folder and pulled out the certified copies from the Secretary of State. The 2009 provisions expired. The continuity officer role was re-established in 2016 under different authority, Section 14A of the current charter. The room stirred. Harold Morrison looked up. We didn't see that in our review, because Tyler's team deleted it from the digital archives. I spread out the documents. But they couldn't delete the filed copies. Physical documents state-certified with all signatures authenticated. Eleanor leaned forward. You knew they'd tampered with the records. I suspected when Tyler kept referencing documents that didn't match my memory. So I verified everything against the official filings. I turned to the next page. Here's where it gets interesting. Look at the signature page for the 2016 amendments. Catherine grabbed the document. Oh my God. Tyler Greaves signed as corporate secretary. He knew these provisions existed. More than that, I said, pulling out another document. He was in the room when we drafted them. Here's the meeting minutes. He argued for stronger emergency powers, said we needed absolute authority to prevent rogue actors from destroying shareholder value. Someone in the back laughed bitterly. He built the weapon that shot him down. Eleanor gavelled for order. This changes our legal position considerably. Catherine, how quickly can we respond to the injunction? With this documentation by noon. She was already texting her team. Diana, I'll need everything you have on the 2016 establishment. I handed her a prepared bundle, chronologically organized with a summary sheet. Harold Morrison raised his hand. There's another problem. We've discovered additional irregularities overnight. The 4.7 million we thought was transferred, that was just the visible transactions. My stomach dropped. How much more? Tyler created synthetic transactions using our Forex trading system. Small currency exchanges that looked like normal hedging activities, but actually moved money offshore. He pulled up a spreadsheet. Total discovered so far, 18.3 million. The room exploded. Board members shouted over each other. Someone demanded to know how this was possible. Eleanor had to gavel 3 times to restore order. "Ms. Elwood," Eleanor said when quiet returned, "your freeze doesn't cover Forex operations." I was already pulling up the Section 9C language on my tablet. All financial transactions requiring discretionary approval. Forex trades would qualify unless they're automated hedging based on preset parameters. These weren't automated, Harold confirmed. Each one manually initiated with Tyler or Madison's credentials. Then they're frozen, I said, and reversible if we act within the settlement window. Which is, I checked my watch, 47 minutes for the London markets, 2 hours for New York. Eleanor stood. Do it, whatever you need. The next 30 minutes were controlled chaos. I worked with the trading desk to identify and reverse every suspicious transaction, while Harold's team traced the destination accounts. Catherine's lawyers prepared emergency court filings. The legitimate executives who'd survived Tyler's purge rallied to help pulling records and verifying data. At 9:51, we reversed the last London transaction with 6 minutes to spare. Got it, Tom Bradley announced from his laptop. 18.3 million recalled. The receiving banks are screaming, but the transactions are void. Let them scream, Eleanor said. Now let's discuss why we're really here. I frowned. This wasn't about the injunction. That was the urgent matter. This is the important one. She nodded to someone by the door. Robert Greaves entered. The room went silent. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 2 days, gray hollow-eyed, wearing an ankle monitor that bulged under his trouser leg. He took a seat at the far end of the table, not meeting anyone's eyes. Robert has something to say, Eleanor announced. The FBI is allowing this under his cooperation agreement. Robert finally looked up, his gaze finding mine. Diana, I owe you an explanation. You owe everyone an explanation, I said evenly. He nodded. Tyler came to me 6 months ago, said he had a vision for transforming Arkason. I was proud my son following in my footsteps, but with fresh ideas. His voice cracked. I gave him my blessing, my connections, my trust. When did you know? Eleanor asked. 3 weeks ago, the day he started. I saw him adding vendor accounts, recognized the patterns. I built this company, I know what theft looks like. He paused. But I thought I could control it, guide him back, fix it quietly. Instead, you enabled it, Catherine said coldly. I tried to stop it. That's what I was doing when the FBI arrested me. Moving the stolen money to accounts I controlled, planning to return it after Tyler was safely out of the country. He laughed bitterly. Obstruction of justice, they called it. They were right. I found myself speaking. You could have come to me, to any of us. Come to you, Diana. You've been sending me warnings for 3 weeks. Every report, every flag, every perfectly documented concern. I ignored them all because, he stopped, swallowed. Because he was my son, and I was a fool. Eleanor cleared her throat. Robert has agreed to full restitution. His personal assets will cover any losses. He's also resigned all positions and agreed to a lifetime ban from serving as an officer of any public company. It's not enough, someone said. No, Robert agreed. It's not, but it's what I have. He looked at me again. Diana, the FBI showed me your documentation. Every detail Tyler thought he'd hidden, you found. Every crime he thought was clever, you exposed. You did what I should have done, you protected Arkason. I did my job, I said. No, you did much more. He stood slowly like an old man. The board has decisions to make. I forfeited any right to influence them. But if I may, Diana Elwood is the reason you still have a company to save. Remember that." He left without another word. The room remained silent until his footsteps faded. Eleanor spoke first. "Well, that was unexpected. Now back to business. The injunction." Catherine checked her phone. "My team's filing our response now. With Diana's documentation, Tyler doesn't have a leg to stand on." "Good. Harold, how long until we can certify clean operations?" "If the reverse transactions clear 72 hours for a preliminary certification, 2 weeks for a full audit." "Diana, can you maintain the freeze that long?" I nodded. "The systems are stable. We can start selective unfreezing for verified operations tomorrow." "Then that's our timeline." Eleanor looked around the room. "Anyone have anything else?" A hand rose in the back. One of the newer executives Tyler had actually hired for legitimate reasons. "What happens to us, those of us Tyler brought in who weren't part of this?" I stood. "Every hire will be reviewed. Those with genuine qualifications who pass background checks will be evaluated fairly. Arkeson needs good people. We just need to ensure they're actually good people. And Tyler's innovations, not all of them were covers for theft." I thought about it. "We'll review those too. Bad people can occasionally have good ideas. We'll keep what works legally and ethically." Eleanor smiled slightly. "The Diana Elwood way." "The right way," I corrected. The meeting adjourned at 11 a.m. As everyone filed out, Eleanor caught my arm. "Diana, you could have walked away. That badge in your pocket, I know you were planning to leave it on Tyler's desk and disappear." I touched my pocket where the badge sat. "I considered it." "What stopped you?" I looked around the boardroom at the portraits of past CEOs at the windows, overlooking a city full of people whose retirements depended on companies like Arkeson being run honestly. "Somebody had to guard the gates," I said. "Turns out I'm good at it." Eleanor patted my shoulder. Thank God for that. As I headed back to my office, my phone buzzed with updates. The Forex reversals had cleared. The injunction had been dismissed. Tyler's bail was being revoked for attempting to interfere with federal evidence. But the message that made me smile was from my team. Compliance Department meeting at 2 p.m. Agenda: how to build an even better mousetrap. Tyler had tried to revolutionize Arkeson with disruption and creative destruction. Instead, he'd proven the value of the boring stuff: protocols, procedures, and people who gave a damn. I pulled out my badge and looked at it. 15 years of protecting the castle, and the castle was still standing. Not bad for a day's work. The dominoes fell faster than anyone predicted. By Monday morning, 19 executives had received termination letters. Not the dramatic security escort you out kind of firing that was Tyler's style. This was surgical, systematic, and utterly irrevocable. I watched from my office as they arrived throughout the morning, each discovering their access, revoked their emails, bouncing their corporate cards, declined. The smart ones understood immediately. The others made scenes that security quietly contained. Madison Wu was the first to break. By 10 a.m., her lawyer was on the phone with Catherine Phillips, offering full cooperation in exchange for leniency. She had recordings, she claimed. Documents. Proof that she was just following orders. "Let her sing," Eleanor said when Catherine called for guidance. "But no deals until we hear the whole opera." The FBI had set up a temporary command center on the 38th floor. Agent Coleman coordinated with forensic accountants, while her team interviewed anyone who'd so much as shared an elevator with Tyler. The scope kept expanding. What started as embezzlement had tentacles reaching into insider trading, corporate espionage, and tax fraud. At 11 a.m., Harold Morrison burst into my office. "Diana, you need to see this." He led me to the audit war room where his team had covered every wall with printouts and diagrams. It looked like a conspiracy theorist's basement, except every connection was real. "We've been tracking the vendor payments," he said, pointing to a web of transactions. "But look at the pattern of who approved what." I studied the charts. They're all Tyler's hires. Not just his hires, look at the dates. I looked closer. Every one of the 19 executives who'd been terminated had joined Arkeson within the past 6 months. But more interesting were their previous employers. 3 from a failed fintech startup, 4 from a consulting firm that had gone under 5 from a hedge fund that had lost its license. "It's a crew," I said. "He didn't just hire friends. He recruited a whole criminal organization." "Gets better," Harold said, pulling up employment records. "Guess who recommended each of them?" The names were like a who's who of corporate failures executives who'd left under clouds, consultants who'd been quietly blacklisted, even a former regulator who'd been forced to resign. Tyler didn't just plan to loot Arcasin, I realized. He was building a network. Arcasin was going to be their base of operations. Harold nodded grimly. "We found correspondence in the deleted files. They called themselves the Syndicate. Their business model was simple: infiltrate companies, extract value, move on. Arcasin was their proof of concept." I felt sick. "How many other companies?" "FBI's checking. But Diana, there's something else." He pulled up another screen. "Remember the Phoenix Holdings transfers? 18.3 million. That's what we reversed, but we found shadow transactions going back months. Small amounts testing the system. Total extracted before you caught them." He paused. 47 million. The room spun. $47 million siphoned out while we'd been focused on transformation workshops and innovation labs. "Where is it?" "Scattered across 17 jurisdictions. The FBI's working with international authorities, but..." He shrugged. "You know how that goes." I did. Money that left the country rarely came back. By 2 p.m., the terminations had become a massacre. The 19 executives were just the beginning. Their assistants, their direct reports, anyone who'd actively participated in bypassing controls, all gone. Legal was working overtime processing severances that included ironclad prosecution cooperation clauses. Eleanor called an emergency all hands at 3 p.m. The main auditorium was packed with overflow crowds watching from conference rooms. She stood at the podium looking every inch the wartime CEO. "By now you've heard about the terminations," she began. "Let me be clear about what happened. Arcasin was targeted by a sophisticated criminal organization. They infiltrated our leadership, corrupted our systems, and attempted to destroy everything we've built." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "They failed," Eleanor continued. "They failed because of the systems we had in place. They failed because employees who saw something wrong spoke up. And they failed because Diana Elwood and her team refused to let them succeed." She gestured to me. I hadn't expected this and tried to shrink into my seat. "Stand up, Diana." Reluctantly, I stood. The applause started slowly, then built to thunderous. My team was cheering. Tom from IT was whistling. Even the security guards were clapping. Eleanor waited for quiet. "Effective immediately. Diana Elwood is our Chief Compliance and Integrity Officer, reporting directly to the board with expanded authority to protect Arcasin from future threats. If Diana tells you to jump, you ask how high. If she flags a concern, you listen. If she invokes emergency protocols, you comply immediately." More applause. I sat down, face burning. Eleanor continued outlining the recovery plan: full audit system, overhaul culture, reset. But I was distracted by my phone buzzing. A text from Agent Coleman: "Need you downstairs, now." I slipped out and found Coleman in the lobby with 2 other agents. Her face was grim. "Tyler's gone," she said. "What do you mean, gone?" "House arrest anklet was found in a dumpster in Queens. His passport's been flagged, but..." She showed me a security photo. "This was taken at a private airfield in New Jersey 2 hours ago." The photo showed Tyler boarding a small jet. But he wasn't alone. Jason Hendricks, I identified his companion, the architect of the whole scheme. The jet's flight plan said Montreal. It never landed. Transponder went dark over the Atlantic. I processed this. They're running together. With whatever money we haven't found yet. Coleman's jaw was tight. "We'll get them eventually. But Diana, there's something else. We found a note in Tyler's apartment, addressed to you." She handed me an evidence bag with a single sheet of paper inside. Tyler's handwriting. "Diana, you won. Congratulations. Enjoy your kingdom of rules and regulations. While you're filing reports in triplicate, I'll be building the future. The old world is dying. You just postponed the funeral. T. I handed it back. He still doesn't get it. Get what? That the old world he despises, the one with rules and accountability and boring compliance officers, is the only reason there was anything worth stealing in the first place. Coleman nodded. We'll find him, however long it takes. I know you will. But Tyler's not the real problem anymore. I looked up at the Arkeson Tower. The problem is making sure the next Tyler can't get through the door. Back in the building, I found my team assembled in our conference room. They'd been watching the all-hands on their laptops, waiting for me to return. So, James said, grinning, Chief Compliance and Integrity Officer, big promotion. Big headache, I corrected. We've got $47 million to trace 17 jurisdictions to coordinate with and an entire corporate culture to rebuild. Where do we start? Patricia asked. I thought about Tyler's note. His mocking words about kingdoms and rules. He thought compliance was about saying no, about preventing progress. He'd never understood that it was about building foundations strong enough to support real growth. We start with the basics, I said. Every policy, every procedure, every control. We tear it all down and rebuild it stronger. Not to stop innovation, but to enable it safely. The Diana Elwood way, someone joked. No, I said, the right way. The way that means the next Tyler looks at our systems and decides to find an easier target. As my team dispersed to begin the monumental task ahead, I stood by the window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Tyler Greaves was probably sipping champagne on a beach, convinced he'd escaped justice. He was wrong. Justice wasn't always handcuffs and perp walks. Sometimes it was a company surviving employees keeping their jobs, retirees keeping their pensions. Sometimes it was building systems so robust that the next predator took one look and moved on. Tyler had his $47 million. But we had something more valuable, the knowledge that the system worked. That boring, bureaucratic, utterly essential compliance had saved 30,000 jobs and billions in shareholder value. My phone buzzed. Eleanor texting, board meeting tomorrow. We're discussing your budget. Think big. I smiled. Tyler wanted to build the future fine. I'd build it too, one policy, one procedure, one perfectly documented control at a time. The old world wasn't dying. It was evolving, and I was its guardian. I pulled out my employee badge, the one I'd planned to leave on Tyler's desk in defeat. Instead, I clipped it to my jacket and got back to work. There was a company to rebuild. The right way. 6 months later, I stood in the same executive conference room where Tyler had once preached about disruption and transformation. But this time, I wasn't fighting for survival. I was building for the future. The quarterly report, Eleanor said, sliding the document across the table, is extraordinary. I scanned the highlights. Stock price up 37%. Full recovery of $39 million of the stolen $47 million. 0 regulatory violations. Employee satisfaction at an all-time high. We're being held up as a case study, Harold Morrison added. He'd been hired as our permanent chief risk officer. Harvard Business Review wants to do a feature on the Arkeson miracle. There was no miracle, I said, just people doing their jobs properly. Eleanor smiled. Spoken like a true compliance officer. But Diana, what you built here, what you protected, it matters. Other companies are asking how we did it. Good systems and people who give a damn, I said. It's not complicated. But it had been complicated. The past 6 months had been a masterclass in corporate reconstruction. We'd rebuilt every system Tyler had corrupted, strengthened every control he'd bypassed, and created new safeguards that would have made his scheme impossible. The Elwood Protocols, someone had nicknamed them. I hated the name, but it stuck. At 2 p.m., I had my weekly check-in with Agent Coleman. The FBI had maintained a small presence at Arkeson, following the money trails that kept revealing new tentacles of Tyler's network. Any word? I asked, though I knew the answer. He's in Montenegro, she said. At least that's where we traced his last transaction. No extradition treaty. And the money. living well from what we can tell. Hendricks is with him. They're calling themselves consultants now, offering corporate transformation services to companies in Eastern Europe. I laughed despite myself, still selling the same snake oil. Some people never learn. Coleman paused. But Diana, we did recover another $2 million from a Swiss account. The paperwork should clear next month. That's $41 million recovered out of 47 stolen. Not bad. Your systems caught another attempt last week, Coleman added. Different group, same playbook. They didn't get past the first firewall. The Elwood protocols, I said dryly. Whatever you call them, they work. After Coleman left, I found myself in the break room, the same one where 7 months ago employees had whispered about Tyler's transformation plans with a mixture of fear and excitement. Now the conversations were different. Normal. People discussing weekend plans, complaining about the coffee, living their lives without fear of sudden termination. James found me there. Diana, you've got a visitor. Who? He says you'll want to see him. Curious, I followed James to the lobby. Standing by the security desk, looking older and grayer than I'd ever seen him, was Robert Greaves. Diana, his voice was quiet. I know I'm not welcome here, but I had to ask you something. I nodded to Marcus, who discreetly moved away. You have 5 minutes. I've been following the recovery, seeing what you've built, how you've protected the employees, the shareholders. He stopped, composed himself. I spent 40 years building Arkeson. Tyler nearly destroyed it in 3 weeks. You saved it. How? You want the real answer? He nodded. I didn't trust him. I met his eyes. From day one, something felt wrong. So I documented everything. Built redundancies into the systems, created tracking mechanisms he didn't even know existed. I prepared for war while everyone else was celebrating transformation. But why? What made you suspicious? I thought about it. He never asked questions. In 15 years, every executive I've worked with asked questions about compliance, about risks, about consequences. Tyler never did. He had all the answers before he walked in the door. That's not transformation. That's a con. Robert's shoulders sagged. I should have seen it. You're his father. You saw what you wanted to see. And you? I'm a compliance officer. I see what's there. He turned to leave, then stopped. Diana, the board has asked me to formally transfer my remaining shares to the employee trust. $20 million worth. I wanted you to know. That's generous. It's necessary. Those employees deserved better than what my son tried to do to them. This is the least I can offer. He paused at the door. Take care of Arkeson, Diana. You're its guardian now. After he left, I stood in the lobby for a moment, processing. 7 months ago, I'd walked through these same doors planning to quit. Now I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. The afternoon brought one final surprise. A package delivered to my office, no return address. Inside was a single item, a coffee mug with "World's Most Boring Compliance Officer" printed on it. No note, but I recognized Madison Wu's handwriting on the shipping label. She was serving 3 years minimum security, cooperating fully with authorities. The mug was probably her idea of an apology. Or maybe a peace offering. I set it on my desk next to my official Chief Compliance and Integrity Officer mug. The contrast made me smile. At 5 p.m., I gathered my things and prepared to leave. But first I had one last ritual. I pulled out my employee badge, the same one I'd carried for 15 years, the one I'd almost left on Tyler's desk that morning that now felt like a lifetime ago. It was just a piece of plastic with my photo and a magnetic strip. But it represented something more. Trust. Responsibility. The boring, essential work of keeping systems honest and companies ethical. I clipped it to my jacket and headed for the elevator. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always people looking for weaknesses, shortcuts, ways to game the system. But tonight I was content knowing that Arkeson was stronger than it had ever been. In the elevator, I thought about Tyler, probably sitting in some Montenegrin cafe, still convinced he was a visionary, brought down by small minds. He'd never understand that his failure wasn't about innovation versus tradition or disruption versus stability. It was about something much simpler. You can't build a future by destroying the foundation. The elevator opened to the lobby. Marcus waved goodnight. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, millions of people trusting that the systems would work, that their pensions were safe, that someone somewhere was watching the watchers. I walked into the evening crowd, just another corporate employee heading home after another day at the office. Nobody would write breathless articles about what I did today. No one would call me a visionary or a disruptor. I was something better. I was the person who made sure the lights stayed on, the paychecks cleared, and the predators stayed outside the gates. Tyler had left his badge on the desk as a symbol of defeat. I wore mine as a badge of honor. The system had worked. The company had survived. The Guardian had done her job. And tomorrow I'd do it all over again. The boring way. The right way. The only way that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect and share our thoughts about Diana's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. And if you really want to help others discover this story, hit that hype button to boost it to more listeners. Your support means everything.